Well, welcome to the third issue in the third volume of Stunt Flyer Video Magazine. I'm putting the finishing touches on the sanding job on the stabilizer and elevator that we built in volume 2, number 1, and hinged in volume 2, number 2. You might recall at that point we put this component away and finished the fuselage, crutch, and the blocks and the hollowing of the blocks, and then subsequently dropped the wing into the fuselage of the Project Europa. And really the next step would seem to be to put the stabilizer in place. And actually we're not going to do that in this issue. What we are going to do is, in the how-to portion of this issue, is to cover the stabilizer and elevator with light-grade silk span. I do this because this is a very fragile unit at this point, and if you put it in the airplane and try to cover it while it's part of that large component, it's somewhat difficult and it's prone to damage. So I'd rather cover it in outside of the airframe and then and then install it into the airframe after it's covered and doped. So we're going to do that, as well as some other catch-up items on the Project Europa airplane, and that'll be the how-to portion of this issue. But before that, we're going to take a trip to Parsippany, New Jersey, and visit with one of my all-time stunt heroes, Larry Scarinzi. Now, you may have heard me talk about this in the past, or certainly write about it in some of my articles and columns, but I was very lucky. I grew up in a section of the country that was very rich in stunt history and had two of the most outstanding stunt flyers in the history of the event flying right in my backyard, and indeed coming right into my home on a regular basis, because Larry Scarinzi and Red Reinhardt were both fixtures at the Hunt household. They were like big brothers to me, and the times I had growing up around Larry and Red were certainly the best of my life, and the reason I fly stunt today is because of those two. So we're going to go visit with Larry and take a look at some of the 28 published designs he's had, and hear a bit about his years in the Air Force when he developed the over-the-shoulder bombing event for the Air Force to compete with the Navy's Navy carrier event. Unfortunately, that event never took hold, but Larry was given his own bomber to travel from base to base and demonstrate this particular technique. And it's a pretty interesting story, and Larry's going to cover it in the segment that's coming up here in a few minutes. I have to apologize for the tardiness of this issue. I was very ill this past spring, and I didn't have a chance to get the issue out on time. But hopefully you'll enjoy what we have to offer this time, and you'll get something out of the how-to. So without further ado, let's get to it, because as always, we have a long way to go and a lot to cover.
If you flew control line stunt on the East Coast in the early 1950s, then these two faces will be very familiar and bring back many great memories. Larry Scarinzi and Red Reinhardt had the stuff that legends are made of. They were first and foremost great builders and flyers, but they brought an excitement to the sport that kept everyone around them anticipating the unexpected whenever they were present. Red retired from contest flying in the mid-1950s and sadly left us in 1974 after courageously but unsuccessfully fighting severe injuries sustained in a terrible automobile accident. Larry continued to fly through the 1950s and 1960s. During that time, he produced and published 28 outstanding original designs for both stunt and combat. Although he captured third in stunt at the 1964 Nats, his forte was developing high-performance engines and airframes. Around 1970, Larry followed in his father's footsteps, became deeply involved in the retail bicycle business, and for the next 25 years was rarely seen at the flying field. Now retired and still just a youngster at heart, Larry is once again enjoying his passion for high-performance stunt and combat models. Now let's visit with Larry Scarinzi.
We're visiting today with my hero, Larry Scarinzi, in his Whippany, New Jersey home. How you doing, Larry?
Pretty good. Yourself, Bob?
Oh, real good, Larry. It's really no secret that you're my hero. You and Red Reinhardt were my childhood heroes, and you're still my heroes. I've said it often, I'll say it again, I'll continue to say it for the rest of my life, that if it wasn't for you and Red, I wouldn't be flying model airplanes today, and certainly not stunt at the level I've flown at over the past few years. And I have a tremendous debt of gratitude to pay to you and Red for all you've taught me and all the inspiration you've given me, and for many of the other flyers in the area as well, I'm sure. So, Larry, we're sitting here in front of the legendary Blue Angel and the Trident, and there's so many other airplanes here that we've looked at over the past few hours that it's like being a kid in a candy store. Larry, how did you really get started in the hobby?
Well, let's see. That goes back a ways. I guess my father was in the Air Force. I was building rubber models, 10 cents at the 5 and 10. And a fellow working for my father got drafted into the Army. I guess that was around 1944 or 45. He was shipped to Texas, and he sent me a misbehaved kit. This is the gas model part. Built rubber models before.
Built rubber models before you got into gas
Right.
flying. When you did get into gas flying, what, about 1947 was it?
No, it was about 44 or 45.
45,
It was
really?
actually right at the very end of the war,
Wow.
give or take a few months.
Well, you have a tremendous scrapbook. When we got here, I was so just delighted to see how many pictures that your family took of you, and then you kept up over the years taking pictures. So really, your scrapbook tells the story of your modeling career better than we could possibly tell by sitting here and talking about it. So why don't we go right now and take a look at some of the early years in your scrapbook?
Okay, we're opening a box that hasn't been opened for like 40 years.
Really?
Do that, yeah. That box has been sealed in a corner. I've been meaning to look into it and see what was in it, but
And today you did,
this
right?
is a good time to do it, so we can do that.
Well, let's go take a look.
Okay.
Well, Larry, what picture are we looking at here?
This is my first gas model. It's a misbehaved, powered by an Ignition Foster 29. And you can see the front end of the cowl isn't on it yet. It's getting finished. It's not finished yet.
So there was more to this airplane to go after this picture.
Yeah, you need the front cowl sides or 2 pieces of plywood in the front, and of course a trim, and that's about it. It looks like it's almost finished.
How did it fly?
Well, when I first flew it, it was tail heavy, and at that time we were not knowledgeable enough to know what it was, and I still remember one of the old timers saying he had one that flew like that and put a pen cell in the tail and it would fly better, and thank God I didn't do that because we didn't know about tail heavy. That would have added to the problem.
Larry, this looks a lot like a Fireball. What's the story here?
This is an early 1947 Fireball that I got used or out of the trash. The wingtips are clipped, it's painted with enamel. It has a Bantam 19 with ignition with a very much reinforced landing gear for touch and goes, which is what you did in stunt contests back then.
There wasn't so many maneuvers back then?
No, you had like dives, climbs, wing overs, maybe an inside loop. But you had to do 3 touch and goes, and with that landing gear you could come down at a 30-degree angle and bang in a touch and go like nothing. You couldn't break the prop.
I understand this is the airplane you broke an early speed record with?
Well, that was kind of a joke story. I said to the judge, the second flight they gave you points for speed in stunt contests back then. And I said, well, gee, can you whip? And the judge said, I don't know, I guess so. There's nothing in the rules about it. So on 35-foot 010 wire, I whipped like crazy, and when I came down, everybody was cheering and yelling that I did 74 miles an hour, and I broke the Ernie Babcock's world speed record at that time, which is obviously unofficial.
Larry, I understand there's quite a bit of significance to the airplane we're looking at now.
This is what I believe is my first original. I'm quite sure it's the very first one. And you'll notice the influence of my first model, a misbehaved fuselage. It was originally powered by a drone diesel. But in this photo I see you have a Madewell 49, so that puts it into the time bracket of about 1948. I probably built it around 1947.
So you used more than one motor in this particular airplane?
Yes, I did. We started with a drone diesel, and we ended up with a Madewell.
Well, this airplane is powered by a drone diesel, we can see, and this is a old Leon Schulman design, isn't it?
Yes, that's the secret weapon by Leon Schulman. It is a drone diesel. And I really had a lot of fun with that airplane. I think I flew it the better part of 2 years. The drone worked very well, started very well, and I don't think I ever broke a prop on it. It always stopped horizontally. And now we're into the time frame where I knew how to do stunts. I could do pretty much the old-time pattern, inverted flying loops, eights, including if you stretched it on the right length lines and the right weather, you could just about squeeze a vertical 8 out of that airplane.
This really doesn't look too much like a control line airplane, Larry. What are we looking at here?
Well, it shouldn't really look like a control line airplane. We're a little bit out of sequence with this, but this is like an old goat trainer. We used to call them goats in the old days. I called it a heap. It's 2 long motor mounts, that's all, with a rocket 46 with ignition mounted in the front. The landing gears were coat hanger wire. You notice the big drag plate on the outside wing. In fact, it was kind of funny. The inside wing is warped up. I think you can see it in the photo. It was warped up so bad that at neutral the airplane would climb quite radically.
So you had to hold a little down elevator to keep it level?
The control system on it was like, it ranged from 5 degrees down to about 25 degrees down. So you never really had neutral. If you gave it neutral, it would go up.
Well, I see you're starting to collect some hardware in this picture, Larry.
Well, this is kind of significant in my life. It was 1949. I had flown in contests all of 1948 and didn't win anything, but in 49 things clicked wherever we went. It was second place in stunt at Millville with a basically 36-inch wing with a wide chord, as you can see, and it was pretty thick for its time frame.
Another original design?
Yes, that's an original, quote-unquote original, with the Madewell 49 in it.
So by this time you were doing mostly your own airplanes?
Yeah, I guess I kind of like that from the very beginning. I built some kits, but I like to build my own, and I guess a lot of people do.
Well, as we'll see later, you certainly have designed a tremendous amount of airplanes, and we'll show some of those as we go along here. Those are sure great pictures you have there. It's really amazing that your family took those pictures in your earlier years of flying, and then you continued to keep up with your picture taking as you went through your career. I've never seen anyone who has such a complete record of their modeling as you do, in both pictures and of course magazine articles. This is the actual airplane we saw in those pictures in the scrapbook, your Misbehave.
Yeah, this is my first gas model. It was built around 1944, maybe 45. It had a Foster 29 with ignition in it. You can still see the wires
The switches.
and the switch. And later on, the quest for more power, we ended up with a McCoy 49 in it, and to perform the early stunt patterns, which included touch and goes, we put this heavily reinforced landing gear on so that you could bounce in like at a 30-degree angle and get away with it without breaking a prop.
Is that really a touch and go, or is that sort of a...
It's kind of a bang and go.
bang and go. Yeah, well, this is pretty neat to have the actual airplane you learned to fly on. I sure don't have mine. That's,
yeah, it's still pretty solid.
Yeah, it really is. It's not a bad looking airplane. Well, just after the years we saw in the scrapbook, your first flying and your first designs and so forth, you met up with a gentleman who was to become your lifelong buddy and pal and cohort and co-conspirator and a lot of things, Red Reinhardt.
I guess the first time I met him was at the Mirror Meet, and he was sitting on the side. He was flying an Atwood 60 ship in stunt, and he had his Atwood apart and the piston out, and he was looking for a file, which I lent him. And he was filing burrs or something off the piston, the rings jammed or whatever, and put it back together and ended up winning the contest. So I guess he knew how to use a file as well as fly the airplane.
I know that you and he spent a lot of years together flying and went to the Plymouth Internationals together, and I've heard some notorious stories about some of the antics out there. Any truth to the rumor that you guys dropped an airplane out of a hotel window and started it and flew it out the window?
Well, it wasn't really dropped, it sort of flew, but...
wing unders, I understand?
Wing unders, level flight was vertical at that time.
Did anyone stick their head out of the window to see what was going on?
No, I think they were all frightened of that. There were also incidents like smoke bomb blast eatery, patrons flee. There's a newspaper article on that, and we certainly don't know how that happened.
Well, the statute of limitations has run out on all that anyway, so I think you're pretty safe.
Then we can tell you about the bomb and the pizza sauce.
Well, after the years that you and Red flew together, you went on into the military service, I know. But in the years just prior to that, you and Red did an awful lot of flying together, and we have some pictures in your scrapbook of that time frame too. You know, and just before you went into the service, you and he were gallivanting all over the country and flying, and I'd like to take a look at some of those pictures now.
We can do that.
Well, here you are with Red, and appears like you're holding a chief, and Red is giving you a pretty impressive sized trophy. What's this all about?
Let's see, this was a Chief with a Fox 35. That was Newark Stadium, I remember now. It was around June 1951, and I won that meet, and I'm not sure why Red was giving me the trophy. He must have officiated, or well, being I won first, he must not have flown, so he must have been an official or something. But it was a proud moment for me because I really thought a lot of Red, and he was just one of the people you kind of idolized. And in my opinion, if you had to vote for the best flyer in the world, it would be Red. And his memory is still with us.
I wholeheartedly
A lot of proud moments.
Wholeheartedly concur on that. You two look pretty happy here. What's going on here in this picture? And these are pretty interesting airplanes too. Very representative, I believe, of the airplanes of the time.
They were very representative of that time frame. They are the type that Red built, and you'll notice the one I had has a little bigger wing. People like Red Reinhardt, George Lieb, that's the type of airplane they built. The cowl on that one that Red is holding, that's my airplane, by the way, and your father, Jim Hunt Sr., built that cowl. And the time frame of that is like August 1951, and I think that was taken the day we left for Detroit.
For the Plymouth Internationals.
Yes, Plymouth Internationals. And Red's Galloping Comedian was home. He was at my house. The picture was taken there. That's why my two airplanes were used.
But he actually flew the Galloping Comedian that year and took second, I believe, wasn't it, or third?
No, I don't think he did too good. The wing fell off on one of the flights.
But the previous year he had...
defective balsa.
What year did he win? Was it 1950?
He won in 1950. This is 1951, and he was a little grumbly that the wing fell off twice, but... defective piece of wood, obviously. Can't be a design error.
Well, here's another picture of you and Red together, and Red's holding a very, very famous airplane. Isn't that his El Diablo?
That's the El Diablo, yes. And the one I'm holding, I believe, is a Chief. This was the Plymouth International Eliminations held at Warnaco Park in New Jersey for Union County. They gave 2 trips to the winners to go to Detroit to the Internationals, and Red and I think Red won stunt, and I got second in stunt. And in numerous trophies, I believe we flew combat with our stunt ships at that time. So that may explain that, because there seems to be a lot of hardware for just stunt.
I'm sure this was a pretty familiar scene back in the early 50s. You and Red and a lot of loot. What's the story with all this loot here, and what contest were you at?
This was June 9th, 1952, and that's the mirror meet with Red's 54 in the background. We won first and second in stunt at that meet. Red was first, I was second. And that just shows us after the meet and what we had won. Red and I have become very good traveling companions by that time.
Well, here's a picture of Red's El Diablo again, and one of your originals, and there's something unusual here about the El Diablo. Can you explain what's going on here?
Well, you notice both airplanes have no landing gears, and in the time frame of 1950 to 52, combat was just getting started. There were no real set rules for the event, and it was pretty common for us to fly stunt. Then we take the landing gears over and run over and fly combat with our stunt ships. These are actually stunt ships, and that's what we used in combat too.
And if I'm not mistaken, the original plans of the El Diablo show the gear held on by flathead wood screws, so indeed you could take them off and then fly it without the landing gear.
With the bottom piece of sheeting removed, 4 screws, and you had the landing gear out.
This is one of Red's more famous airplanes, and we see guys flying this in old-time stunt throughout the country.
Well, people like, you go out to Tucson, you'll see people like Rusty Brown and others flying this airplane. It's been a popular one, and I think it's a real good-looking airplane, and for its time frame, it was really a cute airplane.
And this, of course, is the Galloping Comedian.
With the spun aluminum cowl by Jim Hunt, your father.
Right. I remember, matter of fact, we still have the mold for that cowling down in our shop. And this one featured a hexagonal-shaped fuselage, all built up, very light airplane. If I'm not mistaken, he flew this with a Vico 19 at first, didn't he?
The first flights and through the contest season, he did use a Fox 35, but he later replaced it with a K&B 19 Greenhead, and it flew very well with that.
And this is the one that came apart on him when he was trying to defend his title in 51.
Yeah, unfortunately, the night before his official, or during an official at Detroit at the Internationals, the outside wing did fall off. He put it back on, and it came off a second time. So,
did he just try to build it a little too light?
He built it a little light. I think his top and bottom spar was a little bit pulpy, went just slightly over the line on the spars. Otherwise, that wing design does work. It will hold it. Use just a little bit huskier spar.
Well, those were really neat pictures of you and Red together flying back in the early 50s. And what we're holding here is a gift from Edie, Red's wife, to you and I together, something she gave us after Red passed away in 1974. And this is the framework of the last stunt wing he was working on.
You know, this is the second one. The first one, as you remember, I think you remember, had an upright engine, and the back of the engine was right against the leading edge. And I remember launching it at Union, and I saw him doing a lot of like horizontal 8s and maneuvers like 4 feet off the ground, the top of it at 4 feet off the ground. And I remember when he came down, we were all joking and laughing. I said, "Gee, Red, the thing is really flying great." And he said, "Yeah, too bad I wasn't flying it." So,
he had a name on that airplane too.
Mr. Completely.
Mr. Completely, right.
That was right here.
And then he lengthened the nose and painted the airplane black, which is what everybody remembers was published in Model Airplane News.
That's the one everybody remembers. The other one was only flown once, and that was enough.
It was built out of some interesting wood too, I understand.
Well, it was my wood. He came down my cellar, and in the time he was working on that, I was cutting the stabilizer out and hinging it for one of our square-bodied things. And he sat at the end of the bench, mumbled a little bit with a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper with a sketch of this thing and some rib patterns. He did have rib patterns, and he went to my pile, cut up a bunch of ribs, and it seemed like an hour, hour and a half. I know all I did was build that one tail. He laid out the whole
airplane.
He had the whole framework.
He didn't talk very much, did he?
No, he mumbled. Kind of went, yeah, go away.
This airplane has the 1/2-inch square main spar, and it's really an exquisite piece of woodwork. I mean, it's a little dirty and grungy now, but certainly you can still see the quality of the woodwork in the airplane. He was truly a craftsman. I really miss Red.
Sure was.
Yeah. I understand this is the design, of course, he won the 54 mirror meet with, and there was an interesting story about how he won that.
Yeah, that was an exciting meet. We went to that meet together, and I remember he and Jerry Wagner and myself were really pretty close in score. It was very windy. The mirror meet pattern, for those who don't know, took a good 2 flights. Everything you did upright, you did inverted, like bolo wing overs, double vertical 8s.
The whole thing.
And at the end of the second flight, you got points for a spot landing.
What, 50 points was it, or?
I forgot the points, but it was enough to be worried about. And it was in a close meet. That was pretty important. And I had a wooden Ernie Babcock reel for my lines, which we used for Red's spot, and I put a rag under it, a white rag, so he could see it. Dead downwind, and he was whistling around, very windy. And as his engine came over the spot, he was screaming like crazy. It stopped over the spot. He gave a lot up, went into a climb up to about, oh gosh, way up, about 60 degrees, made a U-turn, came straight down, he dove that thing and punched the center of my reel within a 1/2 inch of center. I still have the reel, there's a dent in it. And the thing, it bounced back up to waist high, flipped sideways, kind of wiggled. He jerked the handle up and down real fast and caused it to jigglate. And it fell down with the engine right over the dead center of that reel. And it was kind of funny because I ran over to it laughing and put my foot on top of the airplane to hold it so the wind wouldn't blow it away. And I hollered to the judges, "Do you want to measure this or what?" And they said, "Nah, forget it, full points."
Oh,
There's no question, it was right on top of the reel.
It's amazing.
But that was dramatic.
Well, right after the years that you flew with, you started flying with Red, you went into the service. And the service years for most of us were pretty traumatic. We had to actually forget about modeling and toe the line for Uncle Sam, but I understand it was a lot different for you. There's a number of things you did with our tax dollars that we probably wouldn't be too happy about if we knew about it.
Yeah, well, we had to thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed, particularly the last year in service. I was in charge of all base activities. I started the Piston Poppers Model Airplane Club off base. I flew with the NASA Brainbusters. It was NACA at that time, and that's where we flew with fellows like Frank Parmenter, Woody Blanchard, Bob Champine. who was about the third man to
Fly the X-1.
He flew the Bell X-1. He was about the third man to beat the speed of sound.
Wow, neat.
And
had a long time friendship with him, I know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, your scrapbook again depicts a lot of the adventures you had in the Air Force, and
yeah, part of it I forgot was the TAC Labs bombing event, which was a toss bombing thing, where you would fly in low and like on an inside maneuver, drop a bomb, like tossing it up over something, like you could enter a loop, and with the Mustang you saw pictures of, you could yank a lot of up, and the release would release the bomb, it would continue up and simulate an Air Force.
I know you have some pictures of the airplane you did that with. Why don't we take a minute here and take a look at some of your service years?
Well, okay, if I have to own up to it.
Larry, just before you went into the service, you designed the first airplane you ever had published, and it was published in Flying Models in, I believe it was June of '56. And this was your famous Greased Lightning airplane. And here you are in uniform, looking pretty handsome in the Air Force uniform, showing off the Greased Lightning. Tell us a little bit about this design and the significance of it.
It came about after Red built his stunt wing, the one that won the Mirror Meet in 1954. And the ideas, the area distribution, the balanced elevators seemed to work so well. My first thought was, gee, that would really do something in a combat ship. So shortly after that, I guess it was early 1955, the first Greased Lightning came out, and it did between 100 and 100, oh, its maiden flight, it hit 103 miles an hour. I do remember
With
that.
a Torpedo 35 in it.
Torp 35.
Wow, and that was in 1955.
In its day, 1955, in its day, I feel it was quite a bit ahead of its time, and that configuration today is still in use by many people.
And here we see again the use of the half-square main spar like we saw in the stunt wing, but this is something you actually came up with.
I think I did. I know I had it before Red. And how you originate any of this stuff, it's kind of hard to say for sure. Like, did Red start using rotten stone before me, or vice versa? Because I know both of us used rotten stone to lap foxes in back in 1949 or 50. It goes way back.
Well, this half-square main spar idea shows up in a lot of your subsequent combat airplanes, and also in most of your stunt airplanes prior to the flapped airplanes you built in the 60s.
You're talking about airplanes like the Sky Devil, the Gay Devil, and the Gray Ghost. Yes, I used that for a long time. And that's one thing I did use ahead of Red, was the square main spar.
Well, Larry, I know you told me while you were in the Air Force that you were involved in a very special project, and this Vico Mustang was a integral part of that project. Why don't you tell us something about that?
Well, one afternoon on a Sunday, we were out flying on the NASA test apron at Langley, and an Air Force officer from Tactical Air Command came over to me and discussed the feasibility of a model airplane event for the Air Force, kind of to be competitive to the U.S. Navy carrier event. And the thing he was interested in was simulating the Tactical Air Command's low altitude bombing system, or LABS, which bears a more common name of toss bombing. The idea is for fighter planes to come in low, approach a target, and as they go into a loop type maneuver, or half a loop, a bomb would release, toss it up into the air, and then come down onto the enemy. And with this Mustang, we set it up so that you could fly low, and when you went into a half a loop or the first part of a horizontal 8, when you got to the point you wanted to release the bomb, you would just give it a lot more up at that point, and the bomb would fly off. That would release the bomb. And you would toss it at a predetermined target. And the scoring would be so much for how close you get to it, plus high and low speeds.
Now, I understand you were sent around the country demonstrating this at various bases and contests and so forth, and you had a pretty interesting mode of transportation.
Yeah, well, I had my own B-26, and the Mustang would sit up in the Top Gun turret, and I'd sit in the nose turret, and we'd come in for a landing, and you'd see the silver wing of the Vico Mustang sticking up. It was kind of neat. It felt kind of important, I guess.
And you did demonstrate this throughout the country then?
It went around the country, including the Navy Nationals, which was kind of interesting, and also wherever they had Air Force meets. Back then they had Air Force worldwide get-togethers and championships, like Shaw Air Force Base was one of them, and it was demonstrated there.
It's a shame it never really caught on like Carrier did.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, you sure had a lot more fun in the service than I did. You know, I was in 1968, you were in a 56, and you had your own personal B-26 to run around in, and
Well, could be, Bob. Too bad.
Well, during your years in the service, you started publishing model airplanes for the various magazines. The first one you published was the Grease Lightning, and this is an offshoot of the Grease Lightning, I understand, the Stingray, and this was never published, but it has a swept forward leading edge and a lot of the features of the Grease Lightning, and of course of Red Stunt Wing too. You want to talk a little bit about the Stingray?
Well, it's actually the Grease Lightning airfoils. All of these ribs are Grease Lightning, but the leading edge is swept forward about 1 inch. I think 1 inch is right on it. It does incorporate the balanced elevator. It's hinged a little differently than the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like my own likes, my own personal stunt ship. It does about 125. Whistles around pretty good, makes a lot of noise.
Good reflex trainer, huh?
Good stunt trainer. If you can fly this, you'll see.
Everything else seems like it's slow motion.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you designed so many airplanes between 56 and 64. At best of my count was 28 different airplanes. And,
right.
and some of them were combat airplanes and some were stunt airplanes, but you also designed a lot of fun airplanes, sport airplanes. Most of them were still fairly high performance airplanes, but not intended for competition. Why don't we take a moment and take a look at least some of these airplanes that you designed between 56 and 64.
Well, let's do that.
Well, here's the article in Flying Models of your Sky Devil, and this was in December of 1956, and I guess this was your second published article.
Yes, it was.
The Grease Lightning being the first, and
yeah, it was This is typical of the old Red Reinhardt, George Lieb 49, 50, and 51 designs. A bunch of us had similar shapes in this type of an airplane. This differs in the use of the half-inch square main spar, which the full wing does not go through the body. The spar goes through, and the trailing edge and leading edge stops at the sides of the body. So there's no center sheeting.
And then you slide the ribs up onto the spar and line everything up and glue it.
Yeah, something like that. You get the two sides of the body with a couple of formers in it, slide the main spar through, slide the trailing edge pieces, lay all the ribs on the spar, line everything up. The leading edge goes through the sides of the body, but not through the whole airplane.
And then you kind of build it in the air.
You can build this in your lap. Lay all the ribs on, eyeball it up, put the wing tips on. Or you can jig it if you're not comfortable.
Very similar to an I-beam type construction in a way. You can put tip fixtures on and line everything up flat on the table and glue it.
Very similar to that. They don't have sheeting going through the wing. Very similar to that, yes.
Yeah. And this was powered by a Fox 35?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And this would make a nice airplane for a classic. It may not be competitive with some of the flapped airplanes, but I bet in high winds this is a really good flying airplane.
It flew pretty good in the wind. I used to fly it at 66-foot lines.
Well, here's a case of a name of an airplane, in this case the Gay Devil. The name meaning perhaps one thing in one time frame and something else in another time frame. This is another case of using the half-inch square main spar construction we talked about with the Sky Devil and the Grease Lightning, and your second stunt ship that was published. This was in American Aircraft Modeler in October of, no it wasn't, it was June of 1957, that's right, June of 1957, American Modeler. And tell us a little bit about this airplane, Larry. In particular, tell us about the use of the transparent finish on this airplane.
The transparent finish was a dye that I ordered as free samples from some dye company way back. I got samples from several companies. We found dyes that would mix with clear dope and just brushed it on. That's what we got. The clear would go on. You'd put, maybe 4 or 5 coats of clear, then brush a coat of dyed red, in this case, on over it. And a brush was good enough. You really didn't have to spray it.
Now, did you use the dyed red over the silk itself, or did you use it just on the balsa surfaces?
No, I just used it on the balsa. The silk came as red silk.
And you tried to then match the tint?
And you matched it pretty close. I guess ideally you should have sprayed a coat of the dyed red over the whole airplane. I didn't do that.
Larry, your next article was in Model Airplane News in June of 1957, and it was the Little Dynamite, which looked very similar in plan form, again, to the Gay Devil airplane and even to some aspect of Sky Devil. But this was for an '09, right?
This was for a K&B 15 initially, and we ended up with a Fox 15X in it.
Ah, 15, okay. Mm-hmm.
That's a 15 airplane. It flew on 50-foot, 2-foot 010 lines at that time.
And this one didn't have the transparent finish. This one was done in orange with black trim, right?
Yes.
And how did it fly?
That flew good, Bob. It was a fun airplane, and I flew it a lot. I took it out quite often. I enjoyed it, and it does do tricks like a stunt ship should. It was done during my Air Force time, and it's typical half-inch main spar, and a lot of the inspiration of this goes back to Red Reinhardt's 1950 Plymouth Internats winner.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the lines of that airplane.
I had a secretary while I was in the Air Force, and she got used to typing these articles, slide the half-inch main spar through the fuselage sides, etc. She could do this pretty much at random. She knew it pretty well.
Today she just saved that as a macro and just throw it in.
Yep.
Besides designing and building the 35 size combat airplanes and stunt airplanes, you also designed an impressive string of half A-type airplanes. And this was the first one of them that was published, and this is the Jolly Flapper. And there's some pretty interesting features to this airplane. You want to tell us about it?
Well, we used to refer to it as the varifoil wing, for lack of a better word for it. 40% of the wing was made like a flap. We did not move it as much as you would have flapped. The idea was to, if you look at the side view, sort of change the airfoil with one big slot, full span right at the hinge joint. Flying wise, I guess you could say it flew like a small Nobler. It was quite steady. It would do very neat square loops in calm weather, not in windy weather. And it had the bigger airplane characteristics about it, and I don't know how it would do in a modern full-grown airplane, but it seemed to work very well, and it was a lot of fun flying it.
And you had an Atwood 049 in here?
Shriek 049.
Uh-huh.
It was quite powerful for it in its day.
Well, here's another of the half A-type airplanes you designed, and this is another very interesting airplane. It looks very similar to a Greased Lightning in plan form, except it has a slight swept forward leading edge, and this airplane was again powered by what, an Atwood
Shriek
049. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this is a modified Greased Lightning made smaller. It has a balanced elevator. The swept forward part of the wing was pretty much to get the area forward and balance the airplane with the engine where it was. And it was very fast. It won the mirror meet at 94 miles an hour way back in the early 60s, and was hellacious to fly combat with on 27-foot lines, which we did at several indoor meets.
Your next construction feature in flying models in July of 1958 was a pretty radical looking biplane called the Jolly Roger. What was your thinking when you designed this, Larry?
No, I don't know what my thinking is on a lot of this stuff, Bob. I kind of just think something's cute and go about building it and try to get the proportions right and get it to fly well. That's a K&B 19 ship, and I like the idea of the gull wing. I think the appearance is cute, and it does seem to fly quite well. But like a lot of biplanes, if you get caught in the wrong place, you have that feeling that it's going to fall out of the air. And oh yeah, that's the one that Rene Berger and his team of flyers from Switzerland would fly 7 in one circle and do stunts like team stunts, 7 at one time.
7 Jolly Rogers.
7 Jolly Rogers, and he sent me a video, and I've seen the video at his house where they're constructing these and several of them flying and doing precision stunts, so I know he did it.
That's great. Well, I know most of your airplanes, Larry, were designed for competition stunt or very high-speed combat sport flying. But this particular airplane is the Sport Coupe, and it was published in July 1958 in Model Airplane News. And it appears it's just what the namesake says it is. It's a sport airplane, just for fun.
It's a K&B 09 powered airplane. That's exactly what it is. And the trike landing gear was kind of fun. Flying on a NASA test apron, you had concrete, and it was fun to let it roll and take off. And it did do all the stunts and did them fairly well. It flew well.
1958 was a very prolific year for you in designing, it seems. This is the August 1958 Flying Models magazine, and this is a very familiar airplane to me. It's a combat airplane called the Killer, and it seems to me that there were dozens and dozens of these built and flown by the members of the Union Club.
Well, back then, one of the club members, Roman Biddle, built the jigs for building that airplane. They were jigging them out and turning them out pretty quick. That particular one was powered by a Johnson. Flew well, reliably. It wasn't the fastest airplanes we had, but it was a good sport kick-around airplane. It did take a beating.
It had used a dowel for a leading edge, didn't it?
Yeah, that one I used a dowel for a leading edge. I remember I'd sit there with a hand drill and drill a hole through the motor mounts on both sides and stick the dowel all the way through.
And again, you're using your half-inch square main spar construction, again, something that followed through most of your stunt and combat airplanes of that era.
That's the way it was.
Well, here we are in June of 1959 in Flying Models, and this is a real serious airplane. I can tell the shape of this airplane. I can tell you spent a lot of time at the drawing board using physics to design the shape of this airplane. Is that right?
Yeah, well, actually, we were on our way to the pizza house. There was a flashing neon sign with an arrow-shaped thing going pizza this way, and it just inspired us. I gulped my pizza down, went back home, drew the thing on a paper bag, and that's the way it was submitted, by the way.
This was 09 powered?
It's a Torp 09. I always liked the greenhead Torp 09. I thought they were pretty neat.
I remember watching this airplane fly out at Stopnut in Union, Elastic Stopnut Field, and it really performed well. It was a hot little airplane, turned tight, like all your airplanes. It was fast, turned tight, would never stall. Generally, all your airplanes flew about the same, really well.
That thing would, oh, you did notice, gee. That thing would do vertical 8s under about 40 degrees, if I remember right, and you keep them light, they fly good.
Well, in October '59, it was back to the high-speed combat stuff again, and this is the Werewolf. I remember this airplane again vividly because you flew it so many nights up at Elastic Stopnut. And in the picture here in the article, it's Red Reinhardt launching it, and this airplane, I understand, owes an awful lot to Red.
Well, it's from the Grease Lightning series, which was inspired by Red's stunt wing. The balanced elevators, the way the area of the wing is distributed. Red was my cartoonist. He built drew the werewolf picture up in the upper right-hand corner of the picture. And I thought they flew very well. Balanced elevators, Johnson 35, and it went.
It went real well.
Went very well.
A lot of these have been built by people over the years too, I know, and they all seem to fly well. I know Tommy Hampshire really loves this airplane.
He liked it. A lot of people have built it. I know Mike Costello has one, and there are still a number of them around in existence.
Well, here's the Gray Ghost. Now, this was published in Flying Models in February of 1960, and to my way of thinking, this was the first of your really serious modern type stunt airplanes that you designed, a real competition caliber airplane designed to compete against the flap stunners of the era. And indeed, I remember watching you fly this airplane at Perth Amboy against an entire field of flapped type airplanes, nobler type airplanes, and it was very windy that day, and you cleaned everybody's clock with this airplane. You went significantly faster than everyone else, but the airplane turned tighter and it went through the wind much cleaner than anything else there. Tell us some of the thinking behind this airplane, because I think this is one of your landmark designs.
Well, I guess I still have the feeling that with a good flapped airplane, non-flapped airplane, you can compete with flapped airplanes, and this was an attempt at that. I used the old method of construction with the half-inch main spar with staggered pieces on the end to extend the wing. The Johnson was amply powerful. In fact, I took the better Johnson out and put a slower 32 in it to keep the speed down. It was run on 10% nitro propane at Perth Amboy, which I don't think many other people used propane back then.
And this airplane was again silk covered, and it was orange with black and white trim. And to my way of thinking, this was one of the airplanes that really established you as one of the top stunt designers of the era.
Well, it had the silk covering was a part of the strength of it. That we said that earlier. On these half-inch main spar jobs, the wings would deflect, but the silk would increase in tension as it deflected. It did help hold it together. What else should I say about that?
Well, it pretty well covers it, and I really think that airplane.
Pretty good. I think with a little more thought and a little more effort and a few changes, that I still think you can become competitive with flapped ships with non-flapped airplanes, and that was my attempt at it back in 1960.
I sure hope someone takes advantage of this and builds one for Tucson and competes with it in Classic out there. That would be an interesting experiment to see how it would do today.
The earlier Johnson I had in that did somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 miles an hour. And when I was flying it with the Johnson Stunt small crankcase engine, which is a 32 or a 33, I never had any doubt that I had line tension on it, we'll put it that way. And we did fly it on 66-foot lines.
The You Name It stunner appeared in the December issue of Model Airplane News in 1962. And this was really the first of your modern flapped airplanes. I guess this is pretty much the first flapped airplane you built since the early Chiefs and that circus clown. And this airplane was really original. It had a sub rudder, twin rudders, and then a third rudder in the center that had the tail wheel in it. It had a very sleek and stylish cockpit area and nose. Very radical airplane for its time. Tell us something about this airplane, Larry.
Well, it wasn't run-of-the-mill. It was, at least the body shape, the wing maybe, but the body shape was certainly not a nobler takeoff. I put a lot of serious thought in the appearance of it. It was different than the other ones on the field. It held line tension very well with a Fox 35, probably a little fast. Flap movement was not 1-to-1 like the Nobler used in its day.
More of a 2/3 to 1.
Something like that, yeah. For the short tail thing back then, I felt you shouldn't have 1-to-1.
It must have got around a corner very well too then.
It was very easy to fly through, like so many of us in that time frame would witness fellows cheating on vertical H, like going behind their head and making them very wide. That one you could do at 85 degrees very easily in any wind.
And the name, You Name It, was because of a contest?
Yeah, the Consolidated Model Airplane Company.
Yeah.
Art Hasselback wanted to make a kit of it, and he thought, well, let's run a contest for it. And he called it the You Name It, and on the kit box to identify it until it was named, it was called the number 570, which indicated the square inches of wing area.
570 square inches.
And it was finally won by a relatively local guy, New York or New Jersey. I remember Art Adamissen was second in that contest, I believe.
He came up with the name Synergy or Cygnus?
Cygnus, I think
Cygnus,
it was.
right.
Which
And the actual...
I don't know what it means, but it was a name that he came up with.
The actual name was the Trident, right?
Trident came out.
That was actually a pretty good name because of the triple rudder effect.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
That's what that probably refers to, the tails.
Yeah. It sure was a pretty airplane, and with the orange and metallic blue, and there was a gold trim scheme, cream pinstripes. Just an outstanding looking airplane, very radical, and I'm surprised we haven't seen more of these at Tucson.
To get the body shape on that, I did spend a lot of time on it. I remember I had the blocks up higher, and then I cut them down, carved them, and redid them a couple of times to get that shape. The cowl and the landing gear pants kind of fell into shape.
Well, again, in the 60s, you bounced back and forth between stunt and combat airplanes. And as I recall, you were on quite a man on a mission to accomplish something with this, the Blitz, in July of '64.
Well, it's a typical good combat ship. It has the balanced elevator feature that goes back to Red Reinhardt and my early Greased Lightnings and whatever. And the idea was to try to get a reliable combat ship over 120 miles an hour. And that's when Fox came out with blast fuel, and that's what we used primarily in our testing. The 35X came out. It broke a lot of parts. The article describes that. I don't think between myself and Bolton Bill Ledden of the Union Model Airplane Club, I don't think anybody broke up more engines in such a short a time as we did.
But you did a lot of the development of that motor for production.
That helped in the development and testing of the 36X, yes, and it came out to be an engine that would do it. The later part of the article will show modifications and what we did with it. And that would do a reliable over 120 back in whatever that time frame was.
In October of 1964, you bounced back to a stunt type airplane again, but this was a bigger version of the Jolly Flapper you had done back in 1957, I believe, wasn't it? And yeah, and this is a much larger version of it for a Fox 15?
Fox 15X.
And you call this a variable ratio wing, was that it? Or?
We used to call it a varifoil wing. We kind of like the name of it, so we called it that. It has a full length slot. We used belt crank pivots, pylon, nylon as hinges on the wing. They worked very well. And it flew correspondingly better. Bigger airplanes fly a little better than smaller airplanes.
Did you ever give a thought to making this into a larger airplane yet for actual aerobatic competition on a serious level?
I've thought about it several times, but I never quite had the energy to go through with it. Maybe I'm not sure how to hinge it on a big wing where there are higher stresses on it.
Well, with some of today's modern materials, we probably could figure out how to...
Today, yeah, we could. If we put effort into it, I know we could build it into a bigger airplane. That does not have the large flap deflection that your other airplanes do. That flap is 40, or section of the wing, if you want to call it that, or the variable section, is 40% of the total wing area. The movement on the wing section is like 12 degrees compared to 35 or 36 on the tail, so pretty near a 3-to-1 ratio. If you move it the full movement and look at the end of it, it does look like a variable airfoil.
The modern stunt flyers tend to think that they were the first ones to really put 60s into flapped modern type stunt airplanes, but if the truth be known, back in 1964, you designed and built the Blue Angel and used a Fox 59 in it. And with this airplane, you were very successful at the 1964 Nationals, as I recall. And this is the airplane that probably most of the modern stunt flyers know you best for, because again, you flew this at the Nationals very successfully. It was a gorgeous airplane. It's fairly easy to build, and it's easy to power with today's engines, and you see a lot of them being used in classic stunt.
The Blue Angel, it started out as a feeling, gee, we wanted to fly a big airplane, or a bigger airplane with something like a Fox 59, which we did use. We toned down the Fox 59 and put it in an airplane that was not much bigger than what you'd put a 35 in. We wanted that. The toned down Fox, let's see, well, I won't go into detail on what we did to it, I guess, but it was built rather hastily. It was started somewhere around the 4th of July weekend, and it was flying in the Nationals at Dallas, Texas, sometime around, July 25th or whenever it was.
It's really fast, and considering you didn't have CA glues to work with at the time.
No, I think like the framework was probably pretty well done within a week. It took an extra hour laying it out. You'll notice there's no fancy wheel pants, no fancy cowl. The trike gear is fuselage mounted, no wing mounted gear. That makes it easier, one piece of wire. And it's a pretty easy thing to build. The basic airplane was built in maybe a week or not much over that, and the other week and a half or so was painting it. And we've had disasters painting it too, and it did end up in 3rd place. From memory, that was tied for best appearance with myself and who else, Bob?
Probably Jim Silhavy at the time.
Was it Silhavy or that guy with the...
Mario Rondinelli?
No, not Mario.
Oh, I think it was probably Jerry Worth with the Electra.
Jerry Worth. It was a tie with him for the best appearance stunt show.
With the Electra.
So, all the stories about wait 6 months before you rub an airplane out and all, we brought it out there as soon as it was dry, we were rubbing it out. It was rubbed out before we left. When we left New Jersey, it had one flight on it at Rich's Hobby Town. I went home, rubbed it out, and went right out to Dallas with it. With Barry Simons, who, by the way, won first in senior combat.
You formed the Blue Angel stunt team together.
Yeah, Barry's mother made us shirts, and they called it the Blue Angels Precision Stunt Team. So I can't make fun of Mr. Clean or any of the other fellas for their white outfits, because we had a Blue Angels outfit there. So that ended that kind of story.
Well, it sure was a pretty airplane, and as you can tell, the viewers can tell from the video that's been playing while we've been talking about this, it's still in absolutely pristine condition. It's almost as beautiful today, or every bit as beautiful today, as it was the day you took it to Dallas. And it's really held up well over the years, and you could get front row appearance with this airplane at virtually any contest in the country right now. I think that this is a good place probably to end this and come back to modern times now. This is the airplane that, again, I think that you will be remembered for by most stunt flyers, even though I remember you, and a lot of the flyers here in the East Coast remember you for the combat airplanes, the half-A airplanes, the Queen Bees, the Jolly Rogers and the Jolly Flappers, and all the airplanes that you developed, the extreme originality. It seems really ironic in a way that what you may be most remembered for is a fairly straightforward flapped aerobatic airplane.
That was put together in pretty quick time.
Really?
Sometimes the ones you throw together quick and rush come out to be your better airplanes. Do you think?
Sometimes. Wow, that's a real pile of airplanes you designed there. Again, 28 by my count was the amount of airplanes you actually published from 56 to 64. We didn't actually take a look at every one of them, but certainly the vast majority of them.
Yeah, that's the majority of them. I can't remember anymore. That's might be all of it.
You were one of the most prolific designers of the golden years of Control Line. I remember I read every article that everybody wrote, really, but especially any article that Larry Scarinzi or Red Reinhardt wrote. And in the time frame that I was most interested in this, it seemed like you had an article in almost every magazine every month, but it really wasn't that way. It just seemed that way.
Yeah, Bob, you really impressed me that you knew by looking at the cover what page the article was on, what airplane it was, and you knew more about it than I did, so I guess you did read it. You passed your test. We
certainly read every word many, many times, and I think we wore out the magazines just reading them. It was a real thrill for all of us to be able to go up to Elastic Stop Nut, those of us on the East Coast, and watch you and Red fly your airplanes, those designs that we see in the magazines, to watch you fly them, and of course the high performance characteristics of all your airplanes, made them a lot of fun to watch. And all of us got a big thrill out of going up there. And you were a tremendous inspiration, not just for me, but I know for a lot of other flyers here in the East Coast. Tommy Hampshire and Kenny Wills and Frankie Pies, and the list is endless of all the flyers that you and Red inspired through your building and flying, and just because you had a lot of fun with the hobby.
We enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun doing it, didn't we?
Yeah.
I guess they were really kind of like the golden years. We really enjoyed it. We were at the right time frame. A lot was happening. There was a lot of action.
Yeah, and those days hopefully we're coming back now with the advent of Pampa and John Brodak pushing Control Line as hard as he is, and we had a lot of fun out at the Brodak contest. We had 333 entries there. I don't think they all flew, but it sure is showing that Control Line is coming back.
It looks like it's coming back, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I guess I was lucky. When I got I ran a bike shop for 20 years, and I came back and someone invented old-time stunt, John Misk, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's like I got back into it right where I left off. I think they did that for me and guys like me.
Well, it seems like you're a kid again. I think you probably believe what I believe, that if you haven't grown up by the time you're 35, there's no danger of it.
Well, why want to grow up? You had more fun when you were a kid anyway.
You bet. You bet. Well, you made my youth much more enjoyable. My time in Union certainly much more enjoyable. I couldn't wait to get up to the Elastic Stop Nut field every Thursday night and see what new airplane you or Red had out there. And those evenings at Elastic Stop Nut, they were maybe 2 hours long, but they seemed like they were 20 or 30 hours long.
We sure looked forward to that, didn't we?
We sure did. And I'm looking forward to more years flying with you now. Larry, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you letting us come into your home here and drag your airplanes out of the rafters. And you're very fortunate. You still have most of the airplanes that you built and published are still here and still in pristine condition, like this little Dynamite we're looking at here. This is, again, representative of the type of airplane that you and Red and George Lieb flew back in the early 50s.
This is typical of that type of design. Yeah, we all enjoyed it.
Yeah, light and little racy looks, and they're still great airplanes for fly for sport, and probably even for competition at VSC. A lot of these airplanes will be showing up in the years to come as people try to look for new designs to bring there.
This particular one's got a lot of flying on it. This is not a wallflower. It's been flown a lot.
I remember watching you fly it a lot, yeah. Well, again, thank you very much for having us. I sure enjoyed it. I know our viewers probably did too. We'll see you on the contest trail.
Okie dokes.
Larry, thanks.
Good deal. Now you'll go home, being it's 3 in the morning.
And it is. That was an interesting trip to Larry Scarinzi's house, wasn't it? And to see all those photos that he's had put away since 1964, I believe he told me, all those old pictures, he hadn't had out of an old steamer trunk since 1964. And we were the first ones to see those in all those years. And I'd like to thank Larry and Ginger for having us into their home one more time. In Volume 2, Number 1, we built this stabilizer and elevator assembly that's here in front of me. And we left it as a completed unit with the horn installed and ready for covering and ready for installation into the airplane. And in this issue, in the how-to segment, what we're going to do is we're going to cover this stabilizer with 00 silk span, the lightest grade silk span available. Now you can opt to use Japanese tissue, which is even lighter yet, but it's more difficult to work and it's much more fragile. But it is lighter, it takes less coats of dope to fill, and should you decide you want to opt to use Japanese tissue, by all means do so. Now, at the risk of sounding like an advertisement, we do have a video available on covering models with Japanese tissue, and it's by Larry Cruz, who is a 13-time National Free Flight Scale Champion, and he covers every aspect of how to apply Japanese tissue correctly. And the techniques used to apply Japanese tissue are somewhat different than those we're going to be showing in this video to apply silk span. So if you are going to use Japanese tissue, I would recommend at least experimenting on a unit that's not going to be used in your airplane. Make an experimental piece to cover. Or at least purchase that video and get all the tips and tricks that Larry has to offer. We're going to be using 00 again, 00 silk span, the K&S brand, and I got this from Brodak Hobbies. And also from Brodak's, I have their brand new model airplane dope, the clear dope. I got a pint of the clear, a quart of the thinner, and we have a camel hair half-inch brush we're going to use to apply this silk span with. The stabilizer itself, like I said, was completed in Volume 2, Number 1, and hinged in Volume 2, Number 2. And the only thing I left undone was a finish sanding, because if you're going to put a unit aside for a little while, sometimes it gets little nicks or dings or whatever. So I'm going to finish sand this unit, the leading edge, the trailing edges, the tips. I'm going to candle it, the technique we showed when we were carving the blocks. I'm going to candle it and make sure there's no nicks or dings or any imperfections in the surface of this stabilizer and elevator assembly, including the surface of the ribs, the geodetic or Warren Truss type ribs. Now, as you may recall, in Volume 2, Number 2, we showed how to make your own control horn. And I installed that control horn into the elevators of this airplane. And subsequently, I've decided to go with an adjustable control horn, so I could adjust the flap elevator ratio. And I've installed one of Dan Winship's adjustable control horns. Dan Winship Models makes these in various sizes, and just lately he's been making this elevator horn with a little dog leg in it, so you don't actually have to cut into the bottom of the trailing edge of the stabilizer in order to get the sufficient amount of throw. And in the close-up camera over here, you can see that that horn, and here it is. And this horn here, again, is one of Dan Winship's, and it's laser cut. This dog leg section here is a laser cut section, and it has a little slider that goes fore and aft in it, and a 440 machine screw anchors that piece of steel. And into that steel, he's embedded or press fit a 1/8" outside diameter, 3/32 inch inside diameter piece of brass tubing for a bearing. So this is a very light unit. It's to me, they look like jewelry. He just does exceptionally good work. While we're on the subject of Dan's horns, there are a couple of other horns he's now making, and although we're not using them in this segment, I want to just discuss them for a minute. This second horn you see here has a bit of a dog leg in it, and this is so you can hook up your flap to bell crank hookup to the top hole here to the bell crank, and you can hook it up so that the angle presented when from the this pivot point of the control horn through the top bearing horn and the flap horn is straight through the when that line is straight, the hookup from the bell crank is perpendicular to that line. It's very important now with the higher flap horns we're using, the slower ratios that Paul Walker has made popular, that when we get the horn input that high from the pivot point and it's straight up and down, and then you move the flap, you're going to get differential movement. What you really want is the line that goes from the pivot point through that hookup from the flap to the bell crank to be perpendicular, or to be 90 degrees, to the pushrod wire coming from the bell crank. And I think that's very important these days. We do that because of the higher horns. We're getting differential movement again. And the same thing holds true going from the output of the pushrod wire from the flap horn to the elevator. And again, he's offset this so that if you actually were to put this in the airplane, the center line would actually go between these two bearings. The theoretical center line, or the vertical line, would go between these two. The top one would be angled slightly forward, and the back one would be angled slightly rearward. And again, you can then bend your elevator horn in such a manner that it's cocked slightly forward to be perpendicular, or 90 degrees, to the wire coming from the flap horn to the elevator. I hope that's clear enough. He's also developed another horn here at the request of Ted Fancher and Dave Fitzgerald, which has multiple laser cut holes in which you can either drill out and put in a piece of brass tubing as a bearing for the flap and the elevator, or you can have them tapped 440 so you can use some of the ball links, either the Rocket City or the Dubrow ball links, which Ted and Dave are using. I believe Ted's using the Rocket City type and David's using the Dubrow type with very good success. And I'm going to be going to that in all my airplanes because, as you may know, I've had a lot of trouble with wire breaking. And I'm going to try to eliminate the 3/32 inch wire in my control system wherever possible. And I think I'll be able to completely eliminate it by using some of the new adjusters that are available, the ball links, and these horns from Dan Winship. So now it's time to go ahead and we're going to block sand, very detailed block sand this stabilizer. Make sure it's very smooth and ready for covering. And then we're going to apply 2 or 3 coats of the Brodak dope to the airframe, to the stabilizer frame. And then we're going to cover it with the 00 silk span. And we'll be doing all that in our time-lapse technique. For the sanding operation, use your favorite types of sanding blocks or sanding tools. I prefer a maple block fitted with 320 grit sandpaper for most detailed sanding. Glue a piece of 320 grit sandpaper to a narrow piece of 1/32 inch plywood and set this custom sanding tool aside for use later on. Using the 320 grit sanding block, sand the entire framework of the tail assembly as shown in this sequence. Candle the surfaces as we described in Volume 2, Number 4 of Stunt Flyer Video Magazine, and detail sand any high spots until there are no bumps or imperfections. Here is where we will use that 1/32 inch plywood custom sanding tool. Drag it lightly across the inside face of the framework to break the sharp edges as shown. This is especially important along the stabilizer trailing edge where we have installed a carbon strip. If the edges are left sharp, they might cut through the silk span. Also lightly break the edges of all the ribs as shown here. Now use the sanding block to detail blend the tip curvatures. Take your time and get them perfect. Okay, that completes the external sanding of the framework of the stabilizer and elevator assembly. We made sure there were no high or low points on the framework, the leading edges or the tips of the stabilizer and the elevator assemblies. And we used this little sanding tool we made from 1/32 inch plywood to break the edges of the ribs in the stabilizer and elevator, but most importantly, the point here at which the carbon facing to the rear stabilizer piece was attached. When we block sanded the surface of this with the big block in volume 2, number 1, we left a fairly sharp edge to this carbon. And by lightly dragging this little tool across the edge of that, we were able to break that sharp edge so that it wouldn't cut the silk span later on. And that's very important. Don't omit this step either on the stabilizer or elevator or when you're doing wings or anything else. You want to make sure you break the edge of the cap strips and any of the sheeting or the framing in the open areas where the silk span will cover. Now it's time to go on to actually getting ready to cover this unit. And prior to covering it, we want to put 2 or 3 coats of about 25% thinned dope onto the airframe. The idea here is to seal the wood, but also to give us some material on the surface so that later when we lay the silk span in place, we can use very thin dope or even pure thinner if we wanted to, like 90% thin dope or even pure thinner like Les McDonald used to do. And when we put the paper in place, we can put this very thin dope on top. It will go through the silk span. It will soften the coats of dope that we're going to put on now, and it will attach the silk span from the bottom. It'll actually grip it from the bottom. This will prevent the puckering you sometimes see or sometimes get if you try to brush too thick a mixture of dope onto the silk span. It won't soften the dope beneath and it won't attach it properly, and later on it'll come up and get little puckers. And we want to avoid that if possible. So we're going to put 2 or 3 coats of 25% thin dope onto the airframe prior to covering it with silk span. Thin the dope enough to allow it to flow easily. With the new Brodak dope, I find that a 50-50 mix is about right. Brush the dope onto the framework as shown in this sequence. Don't forget to coat the ribs. Watch for runs and smooth them out with the brush. When the dope has dried, use a piece of 320 grit sandpaper to sand the framework smooth. I use a T-bar sander fitted with 320 grit sandpaper to sand the surfaces of the ribs smooth. Now, recoat the framework with dope. Okay, working in the sequence shown, that is doping the airframe and letting it dry and then lightly sanding it and then recoating it. In that manner, I've put 3 coats, maybe even 4 coats of dope on this, and some places on this on the stabilizer and elevator, especially on the tips and the leading edge and the trailing edge, where I'm going to rely on the grip of the dope to hold the silk span tightly in place. I put a little extra. And right now, you really can't see this on camera, I'm sure, but it has a slight sheen to it. You actually have a slight finish on the wood. It's not very high gloss, but you do have enough of a finish on there to be sure that you've got some material in place, and you have enough there with which to hold the silk span down when we start putting it in place. And again, I've done the stabilizer and both elevator halves in the same manner and coated the ribs. That was very important to coat the ribs and lightly sand again between coats. So now we're ready to cover this stabilizer and elevator. There are several different ways to do this and several different sequences. I prefer to cover the bottom of the stabilizer first and bring the paper up a little bit past halfway, and then when it slightly dries, I feather that edge with a sanding block, and then I cover the top of the stabilizer and overlap that edge. Some people prefer to make an exact meeting of the tissue paper at that point, and if you're doing a transparent type finish, it's imperative that you do make the 2 ends butt together perfectly so you don't have an overlap seam, which you'd see. And in volume 1, number 2 of Stunt Flyer Video Magazine, excuse me, volume 1, number 3 of Stunt Flyer Video Magazine, Mike Spedalier showed us how to apply transparent tissue to an airframe and how to get those perfect butt joints. So you might want to go back and review that if you're using a transparent type finish, or if you prefer not to have any overlaps anywhere. But I find, especially with this very thin 00 silk span, that you can cover one side, lightly sand the edges of the paper, feather it out, and then cover over that, and you'll never ever see the bump or the seam. And I've never had a problem, and that's how I'm going to go ahead and do this stabilizer and elevator assembly here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to wet the silk span with water, and I prefer to put the water into an old spray cleaner bottle. In this case, it's a Formula 409 glass and surface cleaner bottle, which I've emptied and made sure that I've gotten all the soapy material out of, all the actual material that came in this bottle. I flushed it out through the head very, very carefully to make sure there's no soapy residue in here. And then I fill it with just clean tap water, and I use this to saturate the paper prior to laying it onto the airframe. Some people prefer to put the paper on dry and then water shrink it afterwards. I prefer to put the water on first. I found that paper doesn't shrink much. What it actually does is when you put the water on, it expands. And then when you put it in place and dope it down, when it dries, it comes back to its regular size, which we call shrinking. But actually, it's just coming back to its normal size. It's not shrinking from the point where it was originally. When you wet it, it swells up in size, and when it dries, it comes back to its normal size and pulls drum tight over the airframe. And that will become more apparent as we go along. So it's time now to cut some silk span and wet it down and lay it on this framework. And again, we're going to use about a 85 to 90% thinned dope mixture to brush on the perimeter areas only when we're putting the silk span in place. We don't want to brush and attach it to the ribs, because if we attach it to the ribs and then it shrinks back to its normal size, it'll actually bend the ribs. So we want it to lay over the ribs and not connect to them at this point, but instead connect to the entire perimeter. The center section sheeting, the leading edge, the tips, and the trailing edge are what we're going to actually attach the silk span to, and not to the ribs at this time. After we have it in place and it's shrunk down tight, then we're going to coat the entire stabilizer and elevator assembly with dope, and keep doping it until it gets a gloss on it prior to putting on our filler coat. So let's go ahead now and cover the stabilizer and elevator assembly. Place the stabilizer onto a sheet of silk span and cut a piece, leaving approximately an inch of extra material all around, as shown. Note, the silk span has a somewhat smooth and shiny side, and also a dull and somewhat grainy side. The shiny side should face out. Wet the silk span with water using the spray bottle. Carefully place the wetted silk span onto the bottom side of the stabilizer and begin working out any wrinkles by gently lifting and pulling as shown in this sequence. Thin the dope 80 to 90% and apply to the edges of the framework as shown, and then rub it in with your fingers. Do not dope over the ribs at this time. The thin dope will soak through the silk span and soften the base coats of dope. The softened dope will grip the paper from beneath and prevent puckers or loose areas. Dope the tips and then work the silk span around the tip contours as shown. Fold the silk span around the trailing edge and secure with dope and rubbing. Trim the paper at the ends as shown, then remove any wrinkles and dope and rub. Using a sharp single-edge razor blade, cut the excess silk span from the trailing edge. Note, cut just past the halfway point. Dope and rub this edge down securely. Repeat the trimming, doping, and rubbing process at the leading edge. Now, trim the tips and dope and rub as shown. Okay, the bottom half of the stabilizer is now covered and is drying and it's pulling up very nicely, very tight. And I have to admit I made a mistake. And the mistake I made was before we started covering this, I forgot to tell you one major thing to do in a built-up stabilizer. And that is to punch a hole in each of the ribs all the way down the span of the stabilizer and even into the root ribs. So later on you can punch a hole in the center section sheeting inside the fuselage, and any of the air that builds up in here it has a vent then. It won't expand and cause a puffiness between the ribs. Sometimes you go out to the field and you see airplanes that have the silk span seemingly is actually bowed out, and that's because there's no air outlet cut into the ribs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a little pin vise with a about a 30 thousandths drill in it, and I'm going to punch holes in each of the ribs and of course into the root ribs too. And this is very important. Please do not omit this step, because if you do, you're going to have a funny looking airplane in the afternoon when it gets hot out. The air is going to expand and it's going to puff out the silk span, so don't omit this. So that's what we're going to do right now. Using the pin vise fitted with a 30 thousandths drill, carefully punch holes in all the ribs. Be very careful not to accidentally punch a hole in the covering. Now use the sanding block fitted with 320 grit sandpaper to feather the edges of the silk span. Use a handheld piece of 320 grit sandpaper to feather the edges of the silk span at the tips. Now, repeat the covering procedures to cover the top of the stabilizer. Well, there it is. That's the stabilizer covered. And the only thing you have to watch out for on a stabilizer which has rounded tips is that silk span is very difficult to pull into a compound curve. You can pull to a certain degree to a compound curve, and then you either have to slit it, or as I prefer doing, cutting it and then trying to work out the wrinkles as best I can, and then put a couple of coats of dope on them, and then block sand, or just use a piece of sandpaper in your hand, and you can actually see the little wrinkles just disappear. They'll just blend right in. And you don't want to go too far and go all the way through, but you can be very careful and take the tops of the wrinkles, any of the little bunched areas off, and they'll form in just absolutely perfectly smooth, and you can't tell where they were, or where the balsa wood is and where the covering isn't. And actually in this case we probably do have a complete covering of the balsa wood, but even if you don't, right at the tips there, you're going to put so much material on and finishing on the tips of these airplanes that you'll never see any grain there anyway. But 99.999% of this stabilizer is covered. It's remained absolutely straight, didn't twist or bow or warp at all, and all of the wrinkles pulled out. Again, we worked all the wrinkles out as we went, so there was no significant wrinkle in the material left while the silk span was wet. So when it dried, it just came back to its original shape and pulled up drum tight. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this assembly aside, and we're going to cover the elevators. So let's get to that now. Punch the air escape holes in all the elevator ribs using the pin vise and drill. Cut the silk span oversize and then spray it with water. Lay the silk span onto the bottom of the elevator half and work out the wrinkles. Dope around the perimeter using the 80 to 90% thin dope and rub with your fingers. Trim the ends and continue working the paper down onto the elevator frame. Cut the paper to lay in the hinge pockets as shown. Now trim the excess silk span away as shown, and then dope the paper flat into the hinge pockets. Trim the excess silk span from the trailing edge, then dope and rub down flat. Trim the excess silk span from the tip area and repeat the doping and rubbing process. Now, repeat the procedures to cover the other side of the elevator. Here's the finished elevator half. Now, cover the other elevator half in precisely the same manner. Now, using 60 to 70% thin dope, flow a coat onto the stabilizer. Coat one half of one side and then turn it over and coat the other side of the same half. This will help prevent warping from uneven drying. Now, coat the elevator halves with dope as shown. Well, that about covers it, so to speak. We finished covering the stabilizer and the elevators, and at this point I've put on about 3 coats of dope. Now the first coat was put on about 70% thinned, and the subsequent 2 coats were put on about 50% thinned. And this will vary according to the brand of dope you're using. Some dopes are thinner as you get them than others. Now the Brodak dope happens to be quite thick and you'll have to thin it down quite a bit, but that means it's more economical. You actually get more for your money, and that's a good thing. At this point I'm going to take some 400 grit paper and very, very lightly sand the surface of the paper here and get some of the surface imperfections off. So some of the little bit of grit you get from sanding dust and so forth. I want to take all that off, and again sand around the edges to make sure that all my wrinkles are completely gone, which at this point they really are. And this will get another 2 or 3 coats of dope until the silk span gets a little sheen to it, a slight shine. And at that point again I'll sand it lightly and then go to the Aerofill material mixed with the Brodak dope, which is what I prefer. And the Aerofill is available from Randy Smith at Aero Products. It's a very lightweight filler that sands incredibly easily. So I'm going to go to that, put a coat of that on, and then probably even go to the blocking coat, which I prefer instead of silver. I mix polar gray and white into a blocking coat and then spray that on lightly and sand that, and that blocks out all the dark areas underneath and when you're doing an airframe, fillets and things like that. And I find it works for my purposes a little better than silver does, and it also doesn't pull up as easily with masking tape as silver is prone to. So again, that pretty much covers everything we want to talk about on the on covering stabilizers and elevators with light grade silk span. One last plug for the Brodak dope. I am completely sold on this product. It sands easily, it applies easily, it's economical, and I'd like to thank John Brodak for his efforts in bringing us a quality product once again. This dope is in every respect as good as the dopes we remembered from our youths, and it's just amazing. I really love it. I really want to thank John one more time. So that's it. In the next issue, we're going to come back, and this stabilizer will be primed and sanded and ready to go into the Project Europa. I'm also going to go ahead and cover the wings for the Europa, and we're going to be doing a video on how to do silk span covering of wings for John Brodak. So I'm not going to cover that here. You'll be able to pick up that video from John Brodak. So next time we're going to come back, everything will be covered and primed except for the fuselage, and we're going to drop the stabilizer into the fuselage, and we're going to do some of the work in buttoning up the blocks, and of course make the pipe tunnel first, put the blocks on, the tail wheel installation, the fin and rudder, and try to button up the Project Europa so it looks like an airplane. So that's it for this time. Hope you enjoyed it. I've recently been working with Bob Knoll on a series of radio control oriented building videos. Bob is a professional builder and builds many of the radio control pattern airplanes used by the top flyers throughout the world. His customers include the likes of Ivan Christensen, who is a many-time Canadian national champion. Our first video was entitled Perfect Airframe Alignment, and dealt with the various techniques required to put all the pieces together extremely accurately. The second video was entitled Perfect Foam Wing Construction, and in that video Bob showed me a new method of joining sheeting. Now I have my own pet method of doing that, and we all have our own methods of doing that, I'm sure, but he showed me one that's incredibly easy and very fast and very accurate, and I'd like to share it with you now. What I have here in front of me are two pieces of 16th inch by 3 balsa wood, and you can even notice I picked out a piece that was a little bit warped, a little curved, which makes it even more difficult to join, and I did this on purpose because I wanted to show you how accurately this method works. The first step, as in most sheeting operations, is to trim the edge of each piece that we're going to join so we have a nice straight line, and we do this with our straight edge and number 11 blade knife. We carefully chew up the edge. The next step is to place this chewed up balsa onto a piece of wax paper, and we make sure we put the two edges that we chewed adjacent to each other. So far it's not much different than any other method, but here's the tricky part. Now we take a piece of masking tape and wrap it around the index and middle finger of our right hand, or if you're left-handed, make it your left hand. And we make a little pad on our two fingers. And what we do then is we take thin CA and we hold these two pieces of wood together very firmly using our left hand so there's no joint. And then we take the thin CA and put 2 or 3 little swipes of it over the joint and rub it in with the pad on our 2 fingers. And then we move down the sheeting and make sure it's all together very tight. Put 2 or 3 more or 4 more little swipes across the seam and rub that into the seam. Now the glue will not penetrate onto the outer surface. We're actually doing this now so the outer surface is face down, and this will be the inner surface. And if you push this together very, very tightly and work it together very tightly as you're putting the glue on and pushing together, you won't have any glue get on the outside surface of the skin. And you just work your way all the way down the skin doing this. Now an added benefit to this is that if the 2 skins are slightly different in thickness, the outside, or the surface of the skin, will be even. Underneath might be slightly uneven, but the surface will be exactly even. This is a very, very fast way and very accurate way of joining your skins. And that's it. Now you simply turn it over and you can see there's no glue at all on the surface. And if you want, now you can unwrap your fingers and you can just lightly block sand this the seam, although there's not much there to sand. There's no excess glue and the surface is absolutely even because it was pressed down against the bench, or in this case the glass, while we were gluing. And there is a perfectly joined piece of skin. This is a method I suggest you try at least once if you're sheeting a foam wing or if you're molding pieces like leading edges or fuselage tops. Hope you enjoyed it.